Welcome back to Shudeepa tutorial. This is Chapter 1, Grade 10 CBSE Science, Chemical Reactions and Equations. This is the Module 4 video of this topic, and in this topic we are going to discuss about oxidation reaction, reduction reaction and redox reaction. But before we start, let's recap what we have done in the previous topics. We have studied about combination reaction, exothermic and endothermic reaction, decomposition reaction, displacement reaction, precipitation reaction, and double displacement reaction. If you have missed them, kindly visit the Module 3 video of this topic. Now let's start with 1.2.5 Oxidation and Reduction. Look at the chemical reaction that's given in your textbook. 2Cu, that is copper, when heated, turns to copper oxide. A small amount of copper is taken in a china dish and it's heated in the Bunsen burner. The result is the formation of copper oxide. Let's take a similar example that we have studied in the earlier modules. Carbon plus oxygen forms carbon dioxide. In both the cases, this is a combination reaction. Carbon and oxygen are the reactants, while carbon dioxide is the product. Let's discuss another example. C4H10, that is butane, plus oxygen forms carbon dioxide and water. If you don't know what is butane, then it's a hydrocarbon. Hydrocarbons are compounds formed by carbon and hydrogen in different ratios. The LPG, that is the liquefied petroleum gas that we use for the purpose of domestic fuel, contains N-butane as one of its components other than propane and isobutane and a small amount of ethane. Now the question is, what do you observe in the two reactions? Oxygen is present in the reactants and carbon dioxide is present in the product. Now let's see a few more examples. Carbon plus oxygen forms carbon dioxide. Sulfur plus oxygen forms sulfur dioxide. Carbon monoxide plus oxygen forms carbon dioxide. What do you observe in the equations? Carbon gets oxidized to form carbon dioxide. Similarly, sulfur gets oxidized to form the product sulfur dioxide, and carbon monoxide gets oxidized to form carbon dioxide. So in the above three equations, you can see that carbon, sulfur and carbon monoxide adds on oxygen to form the oxidized product. Now let's see these three equations. Hydrogen sulfide plus chlorine forms hydrogen chloride plus sulfur. Here you don't observe any oxygen as the reactant. Similarly, for hydrogen chloride and manganese dioxide forms manganese chloride, chlorine and water. CH4, that is methane, plus oxygen forms carbon dioxide plus water. These two equations, that is the first and the second, are slightly different from the previous equations that we have discussed just now. What happens here? Here, there is removal of hydrogen. If you observe carefully, hydrogen sulfide gets converted to form sulfur. Therefore, there is a clear removal of hydrogen atoms from hydrogen sulfide to form sulfur. Here, we can also say that hydrogen sulfide gets oxidized. In the second equation, hydrogen chloride loses the hydrogen atom to forms chlorine. So we may say hydrogen chloride gets oxidized. In the third equation, CH4 forms CO2. Therefore, carbon loses hydrogen and gains oxygen. So, we can say CH4, that is methane, gets oxidized. In both the sets of examples that I have discussed, I have used the word oxidized several times. So, what is this product? Let us see. The equations that are taking place over here are called as oxidation. What is oxidation? Oxidation is the process in which a substance adds oxygen or removes hydrogen. And the substance which adds this oxygen molecule and removes the hydrogen molecule is called as an oxidizing agent. So let's see an example to understand what is an oxidizing agent. Hydrogen sulfide plus chlorine forms hydrogen chloride plus sulfur. Now, if you observe hydrogen sulfide, it loses the hydrogen atoms and forms sulfur. In this case, chlorine helps in the process of removal of hydrogen from sulfur. So, chlorine acts as an oxidizing agent. There are few examples of oxidation that happen around us, like respiration, combustion, photosynthesis. Now, all the oxidation reactions do not happen at the same speed. Some happen immediately in presence of oxygen, which are called as spontaneous oxidation. Some happens fast, they are called as rapid oxidation, while some happens very slowly, which are called as slow oxidation. So if I may sum up, oxidation happens either by the addition of oxygen atoms or by the removal of hydrogen atoms. Now let's proceed. Copper oxide plus carbon forms copper plus carbon monoxide. Zinc oxide plus carbon forms zinc plus carbon monoxide. What do you observe in these two reactions? That copper oxide loses the oxygen atom and forms metallic copper. Similarly, zinc oxide loses the oxygen atom and forms metallic zinc. Therefore, we may also say copper oxide gets reduced, zinc oxide gets reduced. So, whenever there is removal of oxygen molecule or atoms from a compound, we can say that the substance is getting reduced. Let's look at these two examples. Chlorine plus hydrogen forms hydrogen chloride. Hydrogen sulfide plus chlorine forms hydrogen chloride and sulfur. What did you observe in the above two reactions? You were right if you have observed that chlorine adds on hydrogen atom to form hydrogen chloride. Similarly, in the second equation, chlorine again adds hydrogen atom to form hydrogen chloride, but in two different reactions. Therefore, we can also say that addition of hydrogen has taken place and chlorine has got reduced in both the cases. So, if we may sum up, reduction is the process in which a substance adds hydrogen or removes oxygen. And in the same way, the element which allows the addition of hydrogen or the removal of oxygen is called as a reducing agent. Let's take an example to understand that. Zinc oxide plus carbon forms zinc plus carbon monoxide. What happens here? If you observe zinc oxide, it has got converted to zinc. And who aids this process? That is carbon. Therefore, carbon acts as a reducing agent in this chemical reaction. Now let's look at this example. Copper oxide plus hydrogen in presence of heat forms copper and water. You can see this equation given in your textbook 1.29. Now, what happens in copper oxide and copper? Copper oxide loses the oxygen atom to form metallic copper, while on the other hand, you can see hydrogen adds on oxygen atom to form H2O, that is water or moisture. So, if you have understood what is oxidation and what is reduction, I am certain you are able to understand here that copper oxide loses oxygen, therefore it gets reduced, while hydrogen adds oxygen atom, so it gets oxidized. Such chemical reactions in which oxidation and reduction take place simultaneously are called as oxidation reduction reactions or redox reactions. Now, oxidation and reduction have just been defined as the loss of oxygen or the gain of oxygen, or maybe the loss of hydrogen or the gain of hydrogen. It can also be explained by another concept, that is through the help of electrons. And to remember that, you can remember this mnemonics which says oil rig. Oil stands for oxidation is loss of electrons, while reduction is gain of electrons. You will be taught this concept oil rig in senior classes. As of now, try to explain the answers in terms of addition or removal of oxygen and hydrogen atoms in the chemical reactions. Now, moving ahead, there are some examples of oxidation and reduction that take place around us. One such is corrosion. Metals often undergo corrosion. What is this corrosion? It is chemical reaction that take place in some metals, not all. Like this case, copper when comes in presence of carbon dioxide, oxygen and moisture forms a complex compound CuCO3, that is copper carbonate dot CuOH whole twice, that is copper hydroxide. This CuCO3 dot CuOH whole twice is a complex compound that leads to decoloring of these metallic copper. We often get to see the corrosion of copper in old copper coins. Now, another very frequently seen example is the corrosion of iron, which is called as rusting. Rusting happens when iron comes in contact with atmospheric oxygen and moisture and forms iron hydroxide, that is ferric hydroxide, FeOH whole thrice. The third example that we often come across is called as the tarnishing of silver. It is also a kind of corrosion of silver which happens in presence of the pollutant hydrogen sulfide. It forms silver sulfide and hydrogen. All these three examples that I have discussed just now are examples of corrosion. Corrosion causes damage to car bodies, bridges, iron railings, chips, and all the objects made of metal, especially those of iron. It is a serious problem. It costs enormous amount of money and energy to replace the metal from these kind of loss. In the process of corrosion, the original metal turns to erode gradually. Now let's talk of another problem that we come across in certain substances, especially the dairy products, which is called as rancidity. Rancidity is a condition which is produced by aerial oxidation, that is, the oxygen present in the atmosphere. And this oxygen specially affects fatty substances that are present in the food and other products. It leads to unpleasant odor and even degrades the flavor of substances. That's all for today. Coming up next is topic 2 science. Like, share, and subscribe to Shudeepa Tutorial. Thanks for watching.